U.S. Republicans have launched an impeachment inquiry into President Joe Biden after months of controversy over his son's foreign business dealings. The White House calls the inquiry all politics and no evidence, but the announcement comes on the heels of waning popularity for the president in public opinion polls, even among Democrats. With us now to unpack it all, Vanity Fair special correspondent Brian Stelter and The Atlantic staff writer David Frum. Hi, David. Hi, Brian. Great pleasure to welcome you both back, I should say, to the program. Thanks for making the time.
Thank you.
David, I'll start with you. Is this impeachment inquiry just about McCarthy satisfying the very right flank of the GOP, or is there something more at play?
Kevin McCarthy has a scheme. He thinks it's clever. It's not, but here's the scheme. The right flank of his party wants to shut down the government when the funding comes due about the beginning of October. I think McCarthy has in mind that if he yields on this issue of impeachment, something just 12 days ago he said he would not do, if he yields on this issue, he will be able to keep the government open in October and avoid the political damage of a government shutdown. I think he's probably miscalculated that, but that seems to be his idea.
Brian, do you have the sense that that is his calculation? And do you also have the sense that that calculation could be off?
Yeah, he's feeding the alligators, so to speak. That's what his predecessor, John Boehner, used to say. You'd have to go out there and give them something to chew on so they don't chew on you. Well, that's what McCarthy's trying to do. He's trying to give them something to chew on. In many ways, this is also a Fox News-generated impeachment inquiry. This is creating content for the right-wing media that has been demanding this action for months, actually for years. And so in some ways, McCarthy is advancing it a couple of steps forward, creating even more content for the anti-Biden, anti-Democrat media. But to what end? We have seen time and time again the far-right impulses, both of the media and the political class, have hurt the Republican Party in the U.S. over and over and over again. And this very well may be another one of those cases.
Maybe even more so than that, David, is that they're so unpredictable, right? So it's very difficult to assign an exact ideology or predict what they're going to want at what time. And so I guess I'd circle back to your first point around, is it the right calculation? Like in trying to satisfy that far right wing of the GOP, can you ever?
Well, perversely, this may be the least self-harming choice of the agenda items. I mean, here is the thing that his party, the right flank of the Republican Party, wants from McCarthy. They want a government shutdown about October the 1st. They want a national abortion ban. They want to have very draconian cuts in certain kinds of spending that are going to take a weak economy and may cause a recession. And they want to impeach Joe Biden. All of those things are unpopular, but from McCarthy's point of view, it may be that impeaching Joe Biden is the least unpopular compared to shutting down the government, a national abortion ban, and huge spending cuts.
Do you think that's true, Brian?
That's a really interesting way to think about it, because the Republican Party is facing this, this has been going on for years, and it's coming to a head where the policies, the positions, the actions being taken by the party are really very unpopular. It's a minority party in a way that it was not 20 or 30 years ago. And as a result, all of those agenda items can come back to harm the party. With impeachment, though, there's a danger in making Joe Biden more popular. This was warned in some ways during the Trump impeachments, did not really come to a head. The difference this time is a lack of evidence, a lack of rationale for an impeachment. This is an impeachment in search of a crime, and that's been that way ever since Biden was inaugurated. So in this case, Biden really could benefit in some ways, at least around the edges, at least on the margins, by having this process go forward.
David, can you reflect for a moment on the popularity or lack thereof at the moment of Joe Biden? I've been reading, I think a lot of Canadians have with great interest, lots of public opinion polls in the last week that have said even within his own party, there are a majority of members who don't really want him to be the nominee. It doesn't seem likely that will be the case, but what do those numbers tell you at this point?
Well, through his career, Biden has been the center of gravity of the Democratic Party. Imagine having a big bed sheet, dropping a golf ball in the center of it. The way the golf ball pulls the bed sheet down to a point in the bottom, that's Joe Biden. He's the golf ball in the bed sheet. He's the place where all the gravity in the Democratic Party flows. But he's never been a real leader with a real constituency in a way that Bill Clinton was, that Hillary Clinton in her own way was, that Barack Obama certainly was. He's sort of there because he's the guy whom everybody can sort of agree on. So, and he is visibly, without overstating the age issue, he's not as visible as past presidents have been. He's not as forceful. It's hard for him to make the case for himself. And we also have a very complicated economy right now, where the job situation is very strong, lots of jobs being created all the time, labor shortages, in fact. But a lot of people do feel cost of living pressure. So they feel they're working very hard. There's work for them to do, but they don't feel that they're getting ahead as fast as they should. And so, of course, they blame the party in power.
Brian, I read a column today in the Washington Post, kind of jumping off what David just said, in which the columnist was praising the record of Joe Biden and President Biden, rather, and Vice President Kamala Harris, but saying at the same time, if they run again, they threaten to undo their greatest achievement, which he said was stopping Trump. Do you think there's merit to that?
And because that columnist was David Ignatius,
Yes.
one of the most establishment elite voices in Washington, someone that is read by Biden on a regular basis, that column landed with great effect. Many, many Democrats are privately saying the same thing, that they don't want to see Biden as the nominee in 2024. But that conversation breaks down with the next sentence. If not Biden, then who? I think most Americans have rightly diagnosed that the gerontocracy of American politics is hurting America, is hurting the country. To have so many leaders in their 70s and 80s in both parties is something that is breaking down the government, breaking down politics, and breaking down trust in government. Look at today, Senator Mitt Romney announcing he's not going to run for re-election. He's looking around saying, well, the next president's probably going to be Biden or Trump. He doesn't want to be a part of that. And he clearly doesn't want to be in a role in a party that he says is being led by populist demagoguery. So Romney's stepping aside, but most of these older leaders are holding on to power for dear life, and that frustrates younger voters. So Biden's a part of that problem, but he's not the only part of it. Mitch McConnell, others are Donald Trump, a part of that problem as well. So there's for all the voices saying Biden's too old, he's lost a step or two, the question then becomes who else, who is going to be a better candidate for the Dems in 24? And that's where the conversation breaks down.
In the case of Romney, David, he said in his letter announcing his retirement, his intention not to run, that he wanted to make way for a new generation, and then went on to insinuate so too should Joe Biden and Donald Trump. He is one of the more recognizable voices in the GOP who calls out Trump, or who has called out Trump. What does him stepping away signify to you?
I think it does signify that, look, Romney is a party man. He's a loyal Republican. He was governor of Massachusetts as a Republican. He ran for Senate in Massachusetts in the 1990s as a Republican. He was elected to the Senate from Utah as a Republican. And, of course, he ran for president. And he's a conservative figure. But he doesn't see, I think, a future. And I think he's also trying to make a point, as he said in his announcement, or his announcement of his retirement video, that at the end of his second term, as senator, he would be in his mid-80s, and that's too old. And I think that's a gentle hint. At the end of his second term, President Biden will be in his mid-80s, and if there should be a Trump second term at the end of that, he would be almost in his mid-80s. So if Romney's saying, if Mitt Romney, as healthy and fit as Mitt Romney is, with a father who lived into his late 90s and kept his wits about until the very end, if Mitt Romney thinks mid-80s is too old, then certainly anyone else should think so.
Brian, I've got 20 seconds left. You just jumping off that point, you finished off by saying, what next, right? If not Joe Biden, who? Is that conversation even going on in the Democratic Party, or is Biden a fait accompli?
It very much is going on, and there are at least half a dozen governors and others that I could name that are waiting for their turn to run. However, it's all predicated on the fear of a Donald Trump return, and everybody's making the same calculation. What is going to stop Donald Trump from getting reelected? That's what paralyzes and focuses the Democratic Party.
Okay, I have to leave the discussion there. I appreciate both of you making your time and sharing your insights and analysis. Thank you so much, David Frum and Brian Stelter.